Did the Chicago Bears finally fix this major issue this offseason? Something that's been plaguing them really for decades, if we're being completely honest. I'm going to answer that question here on today's show. My name is Harrison Graham, and you are watching Chicago Bears Now. And no, I'm not talking about head coach with Ben Johnson. No, I'm not talking about quarterback with Caleb Williams. And I'm not talking offensive coordinator either. These are certainly topics that have been issues for years as well. I'm talking about the offensive freaking line. Is the O-line finally fixed? Well, PFF thinks this is the fourth best unit heading into 2025, which I'm not there yet, but I do think there's a lot of reason for optimism given the financial and talent investment that Ryan Poles and the Bears have made into the offensive line this year. You look at just the last 3 years, well, starting with the Ryan Poles era. The Bears have been top 7 in sacks allowed, 58 in 2022, 50 in 2023, 68 last year. Now, don't get me wrong. Some of that is Caleb Williams and Justin Fields hold the ball longer than other quarterbacks. Certainly part of it. That no one's going to dispute that. But we'll actually get into some data that some of that is a little overblown, especially with Caleb last year. I'm not really going to revert back to Fields in 22 and 23. This is what confuses me, though, is a lot of PFF's data is anti-Bears O-line last year, but then they're like, oh, they were actually 8th in pass blocking last year and 15th in run blocking. My initial reaction to that is it was actually a better run blocking offensive line last year. DeAndre Swift did a poor job at times hitting the hole. And the pass blocking, while not always bad, certainly was not top 10. And PFF's own data disputes that. So I think that's kind of interesting, especially when it comes to the pass blocking grade. And obviously the Bears themselves, with the investments they've made this offseason, are telling you, yeah, the O-line wasn't good enough last year, hasn't been good enough in years. We're going to pay a lot of money to improve that unit. I don't think it's any coincidence that after hiring Ben Johnson, that happened, because Ben probably told Ryan, this unit stinks and we're going to improve it. Let's just look at last year at some of the individuals. My first thought when I look at this, by the way, and this is all data compiled by PFF, Larry Borom, I think we witnessed one of the worst seasons from an offensive lineman in recent memory. And Larry Borom had moments earlier on in his career, but as a part-time starter, he gave up 7 sacks in less than 250 snaps, pass blocking snaps. Do you know how bad that is? I mean, he was one of the worst offensive tackles in football last year. And even with that number, I think his pass block, this is where PFF confuses me, his pass blocking was still in like the 50s. It's like, no, that should have been like a 20. That's atrociously bad. Matt Pryor gave up 7. Now, he started most of the year, so not as egregious. Same with Darnell Wright at 6. I think 3 or 4 of those were in the first 5 or 6 games, so he got a lot better after that. Braxton Jones, 5, missed some time with the injury. Teven Jenkins, 4, obviously missed a lot of time with the injuries as well. And then Coleman Shelton gave up 3 on his 743 pass block snaps. So between those 6 guys, quick math, 25, 29, 32 sacks allowed, and certainly other offensive linemen played as well. If you look at the whole picture, 68 sacks allowed, and everybody's like, Matt Hasselbeck goes on the herd. Oh, those are majority Caleb Williams, and it's a bit subjective. Some of it is your film work guessing. PFF doesn't know the exact assignment for every player on every play, so it's hard to give an exact number. But based on their data collection, they attributed 17 of the 68 snaps to Caleb. Still too high of a number. 17's too many. Ideally, you cut that in half this year. But that's still giving up 51 sacks by the offensive line. That would be most in the NFL by a wide margin still. So that is where PFF loses me sometimes, and I think they do a good job. There's some subjectivity to it, especially with offensive line play. But I don't know how you could possibly say that this is the 8th best pass-blocking offensive line last year, yet they gave up the most sacks in the league. How is that even remotely a possibility? But we'll move on from that part of it. I wanted to kind of just outline the data from last year. And coming up next, we'll take a look at, is this fixed? Have they fixed this problem with the investments they have made this offseason because there's a lot of optimism, a lot of hope. PFF themselves thinks it's the 4th best unit on paper heading into this year. But first, I want to tell you guys about this awesome deal alert. Chatsports.com/Bears hoodie. You can get that short sleeve hoodie for just $33. It used to be $55. Now it's $33. 40% off with training camp around the corner. You could be rocking this. You can rock it in the early part of the season before it gets too cold. Hell, you could go long sleeves underneath and then throw this on top even when it does get cold. It's just an awesome looking short sleeve hoodie as well. Check it out. 40% off, just $33. Chatsports.com/Bears hoodie. Click and shop today. That link is in the comments and description of this video. Okay, let's break down the O-line upgrades and why I think individually and collectively these should be just better on paper overall. We've discussed at length the interior position by position. Left guard last year was a combination of Teven Jenkins and backups because he missed a lot of time with injuries. You go from that to Joe Thuney, and I've said it. I like Teven Jenkins. Nice player when healthy. Even if he played every single snap, Joe Thuney's a notable upgrade. Coleman Shelton to Drew Dalman. Coleman Shelton's a French starter. He's actually a backup this year in LA. Drew Dalman, at his worst, is a top half of the league center. Most would say he's top 8, top 10. Nate Davis, Matt Pryor. Matt Pryor played admirably last year as a backup fill-in guy because Nate Davis was a disaster. He's probably going to be a backup in Philly this year. You bring in Jonah Jackson, who had a weird year last year. We'll talk more about him in a minute. But if he's healthy, should at least be better than what you had at that spot a year ago. But let's talk about the prize, the huge addition, and that, of course, is Joe Thuney. Speaking of the data, he has given up, since his first 2 years in the league, he gave up 9 sacks his first 2 years in New England. Since then, he has given up just 7 sacks since 2018. 7 sacks in what is that, 7 or 8 years? Right there, almost 5,000 pass block snaps. He's been beaten 7 times for sacks. Now, he's obviously been beaten on other reps, I'm sure, but 7 sacks in almost 5,000 reps. Larry Borom gave up 7 sacks in less than 250 snaps, just to kind of put that into perspective there. I don't think you can just even measure how big of a difference that is. Obviously, the resume speaks for itself. 4-time All-Pro, twice on the first team, twice on the second team. He's won 2 Super Bowls. He's blocked for, I don't know, the 2 best quarterbacks maybe ever for sure in this century, in Tom Brady and Patrick Mahomes. 2 different style of quarterbacks, by the way. I think that's important because obviously Mahomes' ability to extend plays, keep plays alive. So, blocking through the whistle, he'll have familiarity with that type of quarterback now that he's playing with Caleb Williams. The point is I don't think you can measure his impact, both as a player on the field, what he'll bring to that locker room. Whoever's playing left tackle, he should help that person out tremendously, the center as well. I think we're going to find out pretty quickly, like, wow, even we somehow undersold that addition because he is still that freaking good as a guard in this league. Jonah Jackson, is he going to bounce back this year? Because last year was just, I don't want to call it a fluke because he certainly has to take accountability, which he has, by the way. Things were never on track with the Rams. So they signed him to a pretty big contract. They really wanted to play him at center. He hadn't done much of that. He played a little bit of that earlier in his career at Detroit, but really his best games and seasons were at guard. He hurts his shoulder in July, missed a lot of training camp there, re-injured the shoulder in week 3 because he wanted to play through it, and got placed on short-term IR. Comes back week 10 after 1 game, gets benched because they tried him at center, and it was a mess. Then he plays in week 18 when they rested their starters. They played him at guard. He dominated against, I think it was Seattle. And then in the playoffs, he tore his meniscus. So just kind of a mess from start to finish. There's a lot going on for Jonah Jackson last season. I still think this is a good player. Clearly, Ben Johnson does as well. I can't remember the exact phrasing, but he said something along the lines of he's going to be a really good player for us. He's familiar with them, knows the scheme, knows the verbiage and all that stuff. So again, I don't need an all-pro there. I need better than Nate Davis and Matt Pryor. You give me that's a plus addition at right guard. And then you have a real center. Whether Drew Dalman's the 5th best center, the 9th, hell, even the 12th or 13th, you have a real NFL center for the first time since probably Olin Kreutz, and that was over 10 years ago. They pay Drew Dalman $14 million per year, the best center on the open market by a wide margin, and, call it overpay, whatever you want. I've been begging for the Bears to bring in a real center. No more Band-Aids, no more Coleman Sheltons, Lucas Patricks, all these guys who are not real answers. This guy is a real answer. He's a tremendous athlete and run blocker. You can get this guy in the move, outside zone run game, toss crack, all that stuff. He's going to be really effective. Thought he took a big step forward last year as a pass blocker. PFF lays that out for you right there as well. He's not elite as a pass blocker, but if he's average to above average with how good he is in the run game, and maybe most importantly, his ability at the line of scrimmage, because he is going to be able to set protections, identify blitzes, different things, things that they threw on Caleb's plate as a rookie last year, which was probably too much to do. Jaden Daniels wasn't asked to do that in Washington. Bo Nix wasn't asked to do that in Denver. From week one, Shane Waldron is like, Caleb, call out protections. It's coming from an air raid college offense. That was probably an extreme ask a year ago. This guy's going to be able to do all of that for you. So you can't, kind of like with Joe Thuney and just his intangibles, you can't really measure that from a statistical standpoint, the ability to communicate, set protections, do all of that different stuff. And then that brings us to the left tackle spot. Is Ozzie Trapillo the left tackle? Is it Braxton Jones? Regardless, it's another addition, another investment made by the Chicago Bears. They rebuild the entire starting interior offensive line, and they add a player to the mix at left tackle in Ozzie Trapillo. And if you remember, Ben Johnson during OTAs was asked, what is the number one job of an offensive tackle? And he said the number one job of an offensive tackle is to pass protect. You need to be able to block their best pass rusher one-on-one. To me, that's the number one job. Everything we can get out of them in the run game is is gravy on top of it. We got to find out who the best and most consistent pass protector is. To me, in terms of at least a prospect profile, if you're comparing him and Kron Amagaji, who they drafted in the third round last year, I'll leave Braxton out of it because he's been in the NFL for 3 years, and he's anywhere from serviceable to pretty good, depending on who you ask. Ozzie Trapillo profiles is a better pass protector than Kron Amagaji. Amagaji is a more powerful, kind of violent run blocker, in my opinion, not as light of feet. Trapillo is more of a technician. He played in a better conference. He graded out very well as a pass protector last year, kind of average to above average as a run blocker. But he is better in pass pro, which tells me if that checks out in practice, they're going to go in that direction between him and Amagaji. So then it probably comes down to, okay, if Braxton Jones is healthy and is practicing, do they like Ozzie Trapillo or Braxton Jones better at left tackle? To me, the good news is you know what Braxton Jones is if he's healthy, and that's a serviceable to solid left tackle who will probably play even better now that Joe Thuney is going to be next to him. But if Trapillo's an upgrade over him, and let's just say Trapillo's above average, nothing crazy, but above average as a rookie, then you're talking about a stud in Joe Thuney, a really good center in Drew Dalman, and I think a potential stud in Darnell Wright, who I thought the final 10 games or so last year played at a very high level. You might have 3 very high-end offensive linemen and 2 solid to good ones at left tackle and right guard with Jonah Jackson there at right guard. You could see the vision of why PFF is like, yeah, it's 4th best unit. I think there's still a couple of what ifs with who's going to be the left tackle, how well does he play, does Jonah Jackson bounce back? But regardless of all that, whether it's the 4th best, the 8th best, the 11th best, this group should be much better in 2025. Like, at absolute worst, this should be a top half of the league offensive line, but I really think shooting for top 10 is a reasonable expectation, at least by the middle of the season. Might take a few weeks to get under their belt, new offense, all that stuff, but the talent on paper is too good for this to not be a good unit. I think it's going to be good. And by the way, don't forget, they also hired Dan Rochar, longtime Sean Payton guy, offensive line coach with the Saints, who's a big believer in build inside out, hence all the interior offensive line upgrades. 30-plus years of experience coaching, both in the college and NFL level, 10 years with the Saints, and that was like during good years with the Saints. That's a real offensive line coach. That's not what they've had over the last several years. So you add all these ingredients up, it's at least going to be good. Can it be great? Can this be a great offensive line? Time will certainly tell. All right, that's going to do it for this episode of Chicago Bears Now. Appreciate everybody who made it to the end of the episode. That makes you a real one. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel, and we'll see you guys soon here on Bears Now by Chat Sports.